All right, man, we are recording.
Right on.
We're good. It's been a minute.
I know it has, man. It's been a couple
Welcome
months.
back to my co-host, man. Been gone for a little bit, busy with work and all that other stuff, but we're good, man.
Yeah, excited to be back at it, man. It's been kind of a roller coaster last 2 months for me, but
Okay.
we're gonna get back into the swing of things here and start recording more of these.
Yeah, we need to, man. So hey, man, today we decided we were going to talk about Skeleton Crew Diaries. That's kind of also where we kind of started our relationship, and then we went on to record a couple awesome projects, man. So I guess probably good just to kick off, and let's hear your perspective on how we first met, man. Do you recall how we first connected? I know we always have this like chicken or egg debate, but
I know I've done some research though.
did you? Okay, all right.
Yeah, I don't have an answer, but I did do some research. So,
All right, let's hear it.
as you know, people who are watching this may or may not know, we don't remember how we first got introduced or we met. Somehow, somebody linked us up, or we met via MySpace or something. I'm not exactly sure, but I went back through my old email address, and I went back as far as it could go, and I went back to 2008, like December of 2008. So it was right before we put the album out.
Wow.
And I found some email exchanges between us, but we were just talking about the album, but nothing before that. So
That's funny.
yeah, I think it must have been since I had that email address and I still had emails dating back to like 2006. It had to have been via some social media platform like MySpace, and I wasn't on Facebook or anything at that time. So I think it must have been somebody must have linked us up via MySpace. That would be my guess.
Yeah, I mean, I thought like I thought we started talking in 2008 when I got back from Afghanistan, right? Because I was gone for the entire 2007, and then I got back in April. So my guess, or at least if I had to put it together, it'd be like summer of 2008 was when we talked about it. I did a couple projects. I think earlier in the 2000s, right? Scorpion Circles, and then Impotent Mindfuck with Hypoetical, and then I had like a large break from 2005 until 8 when I took off and joined the army, and then I was dying to do music again. So I had been like disconnected from the world, and I was like, oh, I need to get back on the mic. But it was good. It was appropriate, man. We met, and I think you were looking to do music too as well. And you were already doing your thing, man. Do you want to talk about some of the music that you were doing before we met with Spoonful and Downright?
Yeah. Man, let's see here. So before I even started doing anything with him, I was doing just music in like the punk rock scene, playing in different bands. And I know we touched on that a little bit when we did the Skeleton Crew Diaries recap. So that's sort of my roots. And then I got into beat making probably I don't know, it must have been 2007, maybe 2006. Because I did a tour with a band that I was playing with in the summer of 2005, and
Okay.
then we played a few shows that fall, and then the band broke up, and I was just looking for a way to make music individually without a band, and
Yeah.
so then that's when I started teaching myself how to make beats, and there was no YouTube or anything like that back in the day,
Yeah.
so I was just kind of in the basement trying to figure out how to do it while I was working night shift. So I must have started 2006 or 2007.
Okay.
And then I think that, let's see, I think that we might have been working together before I did any tracks with Spoonful.
No way. Oh.
Yeah, because, well,
Oh
obviously
man.
I knew P Viz for a long time, Proverb, and
Okay.
that we went through that story on the Keep the Change recap, but Proverb I had been working with, and he had been we had known each other for years before I even started making beats. And then when I first started making tracks, I started collaborating with him. And then I met Spoon through Proverb. But I think we might have already been working on the album. Although, now that I think about it, Spoon and I did put out like a couple songs in in 2006 and early 2007. So
Yep, that's
yeah, we
that's
were.
why I was like, I'm not sure because you guys had the Downright album, right? That had
Right. Yeah, no, you're right. You know, yeah, you know this better than I do.
And I only say that because I was just cleaning out my closet and I had the CD in there, man. So I was like, oh man, this is all the classic Spoonful and D-Mitch stuff, man.
Yeah, man. Yeah, no, you're right. You're totally right. This stuff, this is the thing. This is why I'm glad that we're doing these recaps and
Yep,
you're also interviewing, other people, is because when that much time passes, it all just kind of blurs together. So it's nice
that's
to
right.
get down. But no, you're right. You're absolutely right. We had put out, just some single tracks. And then we had put together that compilation album of just random tracks from earlier albums and just random beats. And then you and I started working together, and the project that we worked on, the Skeleton Crew Diaries album, that was like the first hip hop album that
Yeah.
that I had worked on. And then after that, Spoon and I started working on Keep the Change, because we started working on that. We put out the Skeleton Crew Diaries album in January of 2009.
Yep.
And then Spoon and I started like 2 months after that, started working on Keep the Change from scratch.
Okay.
And then we put that out in October. So that kind of launched after Skeleton Crew Diaries, but we were just putting together random tracks before that. So yeah, you're right. So that's
You know what? And now that we talk about that compilation album, I remember. I mean, I'm pretty sure I was in search of a producer after I got back from Afghanistan, and I think you were probably in search of an MC too as well. So I kind of like worked out, and we connected. And I recall, I remember asking you like if you had some stuff that you could share so I could check it out. And I think that was one of the albums, and there was the other one, the Kitchen album. I can't remember the title of it.
Yeah, Bad Dreams and Kitchen Supplies, which was the album, like the compilation album.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah, man, that's right. Yeah, and see, I was familiar with your work prior to us linking up, so I'm not sure
Yep.
how we linked up, but I was familiar with your work, and I got familiar with your work because Brian
Yep.
Moon was the one who put me onto it, and then we ultimately brought him onto the
Yeah.
project. But I was hanging out down at UVA because he was going to the University of Virginia,
Yep.
and we were just hanging down there for a week. And I just drove down there to visit him, and he had gotten it off of LimeWire or Napster or whatever the file sharing software was back in the day. And I remember him right before I left to drive back, because it was like a 2-hour drive. He's like, "Hey, you had the Scorpion Circles album by Genelec and Memphis Reigns," and I was like, I've never even heard of it. What are you talking about? And
Who are these jokers, man?
yeah, he's like, "Oh man," he's like, "This is incredible. I gotta burn you a copy." So he burned me a CDR of all the files, and they're all like out of order, right? Because he just got them off of the file sharing software and then threw it onto a compilation CD. And I remember listening to it in the car on the way back, and I was just totally blown away with how good it was. But my car, only had a cassette player, so I had the cassette adapter, and I had to run it into the CD player. And so whenever I go over like a bump, it starts skipping.
Some good speakers. Oh man, that's great.
Yeah.
Oh man, shout out to Brian Moon for introducing our music to you, man. That's cool.
Yeah, he was the one who put me on, and then so I was aware of your work, and then somehow when you got back from Afghanistan, we connected. I don't know if somebody introduced us or what it was, and then we just kind of started working on stuff. And I don't think we had a plan to put out an album right away or anything. I think it was just like, hey, let's do a track. Do you remember what the first song was that we did? I don't remember.
Oh, that's a good question, man. Wow. I don't, man. It might have been Revenge of the Puppets, maybe. Nice for time reference too, right? That was about 2008, and you were living in Virginia. I was living in North Carolina.
Yep.
And then we went on. I mean, I think the project we put it together probably in about a year's worth of time, or maybe less, right? But I know that I finished the album when I moved to Missouri for school.
Yeah.
But I think it might have been Revenge of the Puppets, man. That's probably
I think
it.
you're right.
Yeah.
That was going to be my guess. And then we brought Brian Moon onto the track, and I think it was because I remember really liking that beat. That was one of my favorite beats at that time.
Yeah.
that I had done. And I was just like, man, I really like the track. I think you wanted me to send over some songs initially. I think you're like, well, send me over some of the beats you have. And
Yep.
to me, in my mind, that was my favorite track. And so I was like, I'm going to send them this one. And
Yeah.
then, and I think you wrote back and were like, oh, I already got the first verse written. Like,
Yeah, that
let's
one's
use
got
it.
a funny. That's got a funny story to it. That's the one where, yep, I wrote to it, and yeah, I think it was the first song that we did together. I had the concept in my head, and then it was like a late Friday night, right? And I was dying trying to come up with like the perfect hook. And that was like the night that I had like, I'd ordered Domino's pizza and had a beer or something like that, watching the UFC, and probably fell asleep with like crust on my face, and and then I woke up like at 2 in the morning, and it was weird. I was like, dude, I have the hook, and so it was like 2 a.m. Got up, wiped the crust off my face, and knocked the pizza box off my chest, man. And I wrote the song hook on a receipt, the Domino's pizza receipt, man. It was a greasy ass receipt, had the hook, and there wasn't much deviation to what I wrote that night. I wrote the hook, and then I had it. I was happy, and I thought I was gonna write verse 2, and then I freaking went back to sleep, and then maybe like 14 hours later, I woke up and I reread the hook, and I said, "That was it. That was it." And I wrote the verses for it pretty quickly, man. And yeah, and then I was into, and I don't know, maybe the story of Brian Moon had come in at the same time that we were doing that song, and then I was like, "Hey, let's invite Brian Moon to be on the track," and you put that together, and there
Yeah.
it goes. Revenge of the Puppets turned out to be one of my favorite tracks on the album.
Yeah, and there's a video on YouTube of Brian recording his verse that I had recorded that video on a flip phone, so the quality isn't that great. But I remember he had written his verse in a Word document and then emailed it to himself, and then he came over to my place and brought it up, and then we didn't actually have a mic stand, so he
Yeah,
had the mic in his hand, and he was he was scrolling down on the computer, because so as he was working his way through his verse, and just recorded it that way in one take, and then we just we used that for the verse. But
done.
yeah, that video is on it's on YouTube somewhere.
Yeah, I remember seeing that video. That's hilarious. Flip phone, and I thought you guys like. Oh, it's funny. He recorded it holding the mic in his hand. I had envisioned like he had a stack of like college textbooks or something when he recorded. But yeah, that was great. So anyway, thank you, Brian Moon, for hopping on that track. One of my favorites. And then also we did Nightmare Before Christmas, right? Or no, was it Night Before Christmas, right?
Yeah.
Was another D-Mitch produced beat that I really like doing.
I like that track too. Yeah.
Yeah, there were a lot of good tracks, man. At least ones that I really enjoyed making. But that one, I had another good time recording that song, man. That was definitely in the first batch of beats that you had sent me, and I clearly recall those two songs being the first two that we recorded. Yeah. Do you remember? And you probably might not know the story, but do you remember how we came up with the title of the album? I definitely
Yeah,
do.
well, you were the one who came up with the title, but I remember you saying it had something to do with you working the night shift
Yep,
at the time,
that's
because
it.
we were both actually working night shift. That's kind of a funny. Like, I was on
um,
both trucks at the time, and then you were working the night shift in the army with your skeleton crew there.
yep, that's it, man. So I like, I guess I must have been like lonely sitting there and just thinking about music, and I said, man, that would be cool, man. So I started like generating like song concepts in my head. So I think the title of the song, or I'm sorry, the title of the album was already even done before we had even like thought about putting the album together. I know,
Oh,
like in
really?
Afghanistan, I sat there and I was like, man, that would be a cool title, because I remember just jotting stuff down, and I was like, okay, I'm gonna do a song about this or a song about that when I get back to the United States, and then that idea for an album called Skeleton Crew Diaries kind of emerged, and I'm glad we stuck with it, man. That was cool. And your wife ended up doing the artwork for the album too, which
Yep.
was phenomenal. Yeah, do you recall, was that a piece that she had already done, or was that a piece she did from scratch?
I don't I don't remember, to be honest with you. I'd have to ask her, because
Okay.
our most recent project, the Kassan project, that was from scratch.
Yep.
And then this one, I'm not sure if she had just had a portfolio of a bunch of different stuff that she had done, and you looked at it and looked and we're like, hey, let's use that one.
Yeah.
That could have been it too, but you still have the original piece somewhere. So
I do. I got the original pieces for both. I got them signed, and I do have the one for Kassan hanging in my room, which you can't see, over to my left, and the other one is still in storage. I still haven't like fully unpacked since
yeah, from
moving back
Korea.
to Hawaii. But I got, yeah, exactly. But I got a bunch of artwork, and one of them is that piece that Sabrina did. Yeah, so that's great. I'll get it up here one day whenever I get my man room, which probably never because my wife owns the whole house, right? She decorates everything. Okay, awesome. Well, yeah, that was good, man. Yeah, the art came alive, and then you put that together, and we pressed up the album on CDs, right? Small run, and
Yep.
we dished them all out, man, and it was great. I think maybe I have a couple copies still in existence, but do you have any on your end or no?
Yep. I have one left on my end, and then I know that you later, like a few years back, you did a limited run with the cassettes as well. So I got those.
Oh, good. Yeah. So some folks from Italy, they reached out and wanted to get that stuff pressed on Italy. They did a nice little small run to tribute the release we did back in 08, 09. And so that was cool. That was all gone. I do have a couple copies of the cassette left just for sentimental value. So good. I'm glad you got a couple copies, man. Very cool.
Yeah, it's nice.
Yeah. Well, hey, man. Also, I mean, just we can go down the track listing, and I thought, it was cool, right? It wasn't a full project that you produced, right? It was a D-Mitch and Memphis Reigns presents album, and it was a collective album of tracks that we were putting together at the same time, and it involved a French collective that went by Skyzom and his crew. So we rolled with them for a little bit and did some other side projects, but they contributed a lot to this album.
Yep.
There was a producer from San Jose who also contributed for the Nightmare songs. So it was a good collection of songs, man. I think me and you were just very hungry and just excited to put a project out, man, and we did. So that was cool.
Yeah, it was exciting. Yeah, because we had done a handful of tracks, and then I think we were thinking about putting out an EP,
Yep.
and then you had some other side work going on with some other producers, and then we ultimately decided, hey, why don't we just put it all together as one project and coordinate
Yep.
it all, and then put it out as a presents album. So
Yep.
yeah, that's sort of the story behind that. But yeah, I mean, that was back when I was still sampling. So when I first started making beats, I just started like kind of teaching myself how to sample. So it was a really kind of sample driven
Yep.
album with some original composition on top of it. So
Yeah.
like when you listen to like the Night Before Christmas track or
Okay.
the Revenge of the Puppets track, these are samples, but then I'd play piano over top of them, and then obviously I was adding the bass. Uh, but the one track that we didn't use any samples on, that's probably my favorite on the track, is Goldfishing, and that was the
Yep.
last track that we did for the album.
It
And
was.
then after that point, I just kind of moved away from sampling entirely and just focused on original composition, and that's what I did with the Keep the Change album, and then later with the Kassan album. But that was kind of the transition. Was I probably the first original composition beat, and probably my favorite one that's on the album to this day.
Yeah. That was a last minute ad, and I think the album was done already, and you had like hooked up that beat. And I
Yeah.
was like, oh, I don't know if I want to add this. I ended up recording the song quite quickly. But I think it was just me excited to get the project out. So I'm glad you talked me into putting that song. And it's a great track too, as well. And yeah, it's just wild, man. Yeah. So um, I'm glad we did that, and I think that probably segued you into the Spoonful album, right? So you guys didn't use any samples for that either, right?
No.
Wow, amazing.
Yeah, it's
Yeah.
all original composition. Yeah, because that's sort of where I came from. So I came from a rock background, and there's no
Yep.
sampling involved, obviously, when you're playing guitar in a rock band. And
Yep.
then when I got into making beats, I just like I didn't even know, like, to be honest with you, when I started making beats, I didn't even know people sampled. I was just,
Oh, right, right.
I was thinking in I would hear all these crazy horns and strings, and I tried to replicate it using like Fruity Loops or Reason. I'm like, how are these guys creating these tracks?
Sure.
And I found out they're just like snagging them from records.
Right, right. And I didn't have that problem, right? I was just like, hey man, can you find me a beat with like horns or something? And
Yeah. Yeah,
so
I came from like a completely different background. I had no knowledge of hip hop or anything, and so I was just trying to figure it all out. And I didn't really know many people in the game, right?
yeah,
And then once I learned how to sample, then I just started hitting up these old like Goodwill and places like
yep,
that, finding old dusty records, and then just digging through them and trying to find rare samples, and
yeah,
speeding the record up really fast and trying to get
yep.
different sounds, and chopping it in different places and flipping it. And that was a lot of fun, man. I really enjoyed that because it completely took me outside my comfort zone, and it's a lot of fun going and digging and trying to find those records, and
Yeah.
so I had a blast with that. And so there was a lot of sample driven tracks on this album, and then a lot of the stuff that I was doing with Spoon at the time. But then just kind of transitioned over to doing my own thing, which was just the
Sure.
original composition on top of the sampling that I'd done previously, and then I just moved it all over to original composition from there.
Yeah, that's fun, man. Like I don't think I had the patience to make beats, but I definitely enjoyed sample searching. So it was good, just digging through the records and just trying to find that loop, like you mentioned, right? And to
Yeah.
find that golden loop to turn it into something amazing. So yeah, that was great, man. And I'm glad that for the album we decided to plug in some D-Mitch instrumentals only.
Oh
And
yeah. Yeah.
yeah, we plugged in three of your beats in there that would run as solo. And the first one, "It's Raining Outside," was dope because it was actually raining
Yeah.
uh, outside. When you produced the beat, and I know you like recorded the sound of the rain too, as well, right?
Yeah. I remember it distinctly, man. I was just hanging out. I was renting a townhouse at the time, and I was on the top floor, and it was springtime, and it was the middle of the day, and this storm just came in, and I was just messing around the guitar, and I had the windows open anyways, so I started
Yeah,
playing the guitar, and I picked up the rain
that was great.
coming through the window, and then I just flipped it on the track. So yeah.
Yeah, and I think I'm pretty sure that I got phone calls on both ends. One, when you were recording it and you talked to me about the idea of just recording the ring. I said, "Oh man, that's super cool, man." And then after you finished the beat, which turned out really good, and I can't remember when we decided to use that as the intro, but I thought it was the perfect intro into the album. Set it off, man.
Transitions really well into the first track, the next song of the album. Like, I
Yeah.
think it's in the same key and everything, so it just kind of flows well. It just worked out.
Yeah, City with No Name, and those that was at least one of the beats that my buddy contributed from France, and they did a bunch of other stuff too as well. Smile of the Black Dahlia, and City of No Name, and Postscript to Mars, which was another song that they did, and that featured our buddy High Poetical,
Yep,
right?
yep,
Who yeah, you first heard on the Impotent Mindfuck album. It's another awesome MC and producer, which I'm glad we did the interview with him a couple months ago, and I know that you guys have connected since then, and he's got a
yep.
bunch of stuff that you have put inside a folder. And I saw him for my daughter's birthday party a couple weeks ago, so he's just getting back from a long break and some school, and so he talked about tapping into that folder really soon. So I hope that you guys get together and put something down. The D-Mitch and High Poetical album.
Yeah, man, I'm looking forward to potentially working on some tracks with them. So yeah, that came from that call that we did for
Yep,
the
that
for the
was fun.
podcast. Yeah, and yeah, I just figured, I keep coming up with these random ideas, but I don't actually build a beat around them. So what I'm trying to do is just create all these basically original composition samples.
Yep.
And since he comes from a sampling background, just creating a folder and dumping all these ideas in there, and then whatever catches his ear, he can then take it as a sample and flip it however he wants, and then turn it into a beat. And so I think that's where we're starting now. Who knows where it will end up, but I'm excited to work on it. It's a different type of project.
Yeah, most definitely, man. I know you guys have known of each other's music for a long time, so I think it was just right that the roads align and you guys cross over and do something together. So that's cool, man.
Yeah, absolutely, man. Absolutely.
Yeah, very cool, man. Well, what about and what was your aside from the Revenge of the Puppets album, man? Did you have any other standout tracks that you did? You mentioned Night Before Christmas. Was there any other track that kind of stuck out to you?
From the album, I'd have
Yeah,
to say Goldfishin' by far is
yeah,
my favorite track. Um,
hands down.
that Night Before Christmas and Revenge of the Puppets.
Okay.
To me, those are the top three. But I gotta say, Goldfishin' takes the cake, man.
Good, man. Yeah, I got to go back. When was the last time you actually listened to the album? Has it been a while?
I listened to it, I think like 2 or 3 months ago.
Okay, yeah, I think
When
about
we
the
were
same.
prepping to do a call to go over the album, I was like, well, I better
Yeah,
go back and listen
listen to
to
the
it.
album. That was
I
great.
never listen to my own stuff. I put it out and then I'll listen to it after it comes out, and then I never listen to it ever again. So
Yeah, you're right. I'll put it out on record too, man. Just oh man, yeah, yeah, we listened to the song so many times that actually when it gets out, you're like, oh, I'm tired of this song, right? So, still new for everybody, but yeah, I feel you, man. I'm just I told people in previous discussions, man, I'm always trying to come up with something better, man. So,
yeah,
yeah, you know how it goes, and yeah, it was fun though, man. It was good time listening to the album, and it brought me back to early 2008 when we were putting that together, and what I was going through in my life at the time and how
yeah.
work was. So it definitely took me back. So it was good, man. A good sample of what hip hop was like in the early 2000s, right?
I know, man. It was a good time. To me, it's like the perfect time for making music because it wasn't as oversaturated and easy as it is now, right? Now you can basically
Yep.
just go and have artificial intelligence write you a beat if you want to, and you can send files back and forth really easily. And it's kind of unfortunate because it's gotten so oversaturated and it's so easy to do. Whereas back then, you really had to teach yourself how to do it. You had to learn from scratch,
Yep.
and but the technology was advanced enough that you could still connect with people, you could
Yep.
still send files back and forth, and so it was a really nice period of time, transition period, where it we could collaborate and not have to be in the same room,
Sure.
and you could connect with people all over the world, but it was still kind of a niche thing,
Yeah. Yep. Definitely.
and it wasn't easy to do.
Yeah.
So there wasn't a whole lot of people who were in the game doing it, and so it was just like we kind of caught it at the back end of that, that period, right up until like 2010 or so before it just started to explode, and now it's just kind of crazy, you know.
Yeah. Yeah. I recorded that whole album using Cool Edit Pro.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
And the beats, did you do it through Fruity Loops or were you using Cool
I did
Edit
all
Pro?
through Reason.
Oh, Reason. Okay.
Yeah, but the difference is between Reason today and Reason back then is uh, Reason back then you couldn't record into the software. So
Okay.
you could bring samples into Reason
Yep.
and you could flip them and you could create the drum loops and add effects or do whatever. But you couldn't actually record directly into the program unless you were doing something through MIDI. But if you were doing vocals or a sample or trying to play guitar or anything, you had to record all of that into another program. So I would record or sample everything in Cool Edit Pro,
Okay.
and then after I recorded it there, then I
Brought it
would
back.
bring it into Reason and then
Okay.
and work it through there. Nowadays, the newer version of Reason allows you. It basically works as a DAW, so you
Yeah.
don't need to have Cool Edit Pro or anything like that separate. You can just do it all in Reason. But back
Yeah.
then, I had to do Cool Edit Pro mixed with Reason.
Yeah. Can you actually record vocals in the Reason too as well?
Yeah, yeah,
Oh wow.
you can do it everything in there.
Okay. Yeah, Cool Edit Pro was the bomb. I think like
Yeah.
some some dude had like the code that spread around the internet.
Yeah, man. Yeah, the one and only Peter Quisgard, man.
Yeah, yeah, that's it. And I think they actually did an interview or an article about him, right? Like,
Yeah, they
who's
did.
Peter Quisgard, man? And he must supply the entire world with their their Cool Edit Pro program, man. I still
Dude, that
use
guy's
it.
responsible for so much underground
Yeah,
music.
he has no
Never would have
idea.
existed.
Yeah, that had to be like the most user-friendly program ever. And I know I think Sony has then bought the album, and is it's called Audition now, right? But it's
Yeah,
still
Adobe Audition. Yeah, they had transitioned it over to Adobe Audition. I know by at least 2010 or 2011.
okay.
And then I don't know when they phased that out or if it still exists. But
Yeah.
Full Edit Pro, man. Yeah, and that's what Spoon and I would use for everything. Like early on, 2006, 2007 tracks, but the entire Keep the Change album was recorded on Cool Edit Pro.
Look at
And the
that.
only thing that we didn't do in Cool Edit Pro was the drums, which we used using the drum machine in Reason. But what I would do is I would export all the snares and kicks and hi-hats and all individually from Reason and then bring them into Cool Edit Pro. So that way we could edit it there and then drop things out to emphasize, different, punchlines or whatever.
Yeah.
So yeah, we did everything in Cool Edit Pro. And I think you're still using it to this day, aren't you?
I am, man. Shout out to Peter, man. It just doesn't get easier than that, man. It's so user friendly. So I'm glad I'm glad it still works. I'm actually surprised that it still works too.
I know, man. It's crazy. You got to work in some track in the future. Some shout out to Peter Quisgard.
I know. I do.
Yeah.
Tribute.
I don't know what rhymes with Quisgard, but you'll figure it out.
Yeah. But right there alone, man, like that platform was responsible for Scorpion Circles and Impotent Mindfuck. It was
Wow.
responsible for Keep the Change and part of Kassan. So there you go,
Yep.
man. That's 4 albums already, courtesy of Peter, man.
I know, over like a 20-year period, and it's still going strong. Because really, man, like that's all you need. Like what people don't understand is the broke stuff is the dope stuff, man. Like that's all you need.
That's right.
You just need basic stuff, man. Like you don't need all this fancy equipment. Yeah, I remember, dude. I'll give you an example. Spoon and I were, I guess it was around the time that we had done Keep the Change. And this dude who later went on to become a famous underground hip hop head, he was just coming up and hadn't put out any music yet, but he was just like this huge Spoon fan, right? And he would send Spoon messages and just be, "Hey man, I like your music. Do you have any advice or whatever?" And he like wanted to become an artist. He wanted to become a rapper, and he later did and became pretty famous. Yep. But he'd hit us up, and then he hit up. I remember it distinctly. He hit up Spoon one day, and he's like, "Man, my parents hooked me up. They got me. What was that? What was that recording software? Oh yeah, Pro Tools. Yep. And so he got and back then it was like $2,000. And he's like, man, I got Pro Tools. I got this crazy mic. I got all this stuff, and he's sending all the equipment. And he's like, hey man, so how do you use this?
Yeah.
Right. He's like, it got all the equipment, right? Because he figured he had to get all the equipment. He didn't know how to use it. And I remember Spoon writing back like, hey man, I wish I could tell you, but I just use a pirated version of Quora.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah. Like an SM58 microphone, cheap mic, with some pantyhose that you put over top of the clothes hanger to work as a pop filter. So I mean, all in, you're like maybe $50 in, right? Yeah. With a pirated version of some basic software, and you're putting out a dope album. And so he couldn't believe it. He thought that we were just messing with him. But we're like, nah, dude, it's just the basic stuff. That's all you need.
The broke stuff is the dope stuff, man. No, hey, we used a couple Radio Shack mics, and
Yeah.
And I even used a USB plug-in mic, so I didn't have
Yep.
anything fancy. A real generic condenser mic. I don't even know if it was a condenser mic. Might have been a karaoke mic, but it worked, man. It did the trick. And I know even like I don't know if you remember Benefit, right? Benefit put out this amazing album too, and I think he used just the generic computer mic, so
Yeah.
it produced a great sound, and it
I
worked.
remember I remember Aerospace. So he's from the DC area, and
Yeah.
I remember him. I guess he was doing an interview or something, and they asked him about some of his earlier work, and they're like, "Man, what were you using to record this stuff? Sounds dope." And he was like, "Man, you remember that band or that video game Garage Band? It came with a microphone, and so I just used that
Oh,
microphone for
cow.
the album.
Oh man, that's
So I
crazy.
used the Garage."
Yeah, he has some good stuff too. Did he ever record on any of your beats? I think he might
He, he,
have done
he,
something.
dude, well, since we're talking about Skeleton Crew Diaries, he used one of the instrumentals on the Skeleton Crew Diaries for a track. And I remember that was one of the first times that he had reached out to me, as he had sent me that track. And he was like, "Hey, man, I did a rhyme over one of the beats from the Skeleton Crew Diaries album," and he sent it over, and it's on YouTube
Okay.
somewhere. And I think it's called Think Sync Fail or something like that. So if you go to YouTube and type in like Think Sync Fail, I don't know if that's for sure the name of it.
Yeah.
But then put in Aerospace, then it should pop up. Actually, I'll just put it in here. See if
Yeah,
it
I
shows
think it
up.
was over the Eschaton beat, and then I know he went on to
That's
become a
right.
successful rapper. Signed with Sprite too, and I think he's still signed with them to this day, right? Still doing music for them, and I know he's quite active in the scene too as well.
Yeah, I haven't talked to him forever,
Yeah, good,
but
good
yeah,
on him.
he was putting it down with some um, you know, cheap equipment.
Yeah, hey man, that's how it's got to start somewhere, and that's great. And it produced an awesome sound that cannot be emulated.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, I'll have to look up that song. It's been a while since I've heard the song, but I do remember him doing a song over one of the beats. So that's great, man.
Yeah, and that's not the name of the song because I just put it in. I was looking over here to the left because I was trying to figure out what the name of the track was, and that's
It did
definitely
pop
not the
up.
name of the song. So I'm not sure where to find it, but it's on YouTube somewhere. So if somebody wants to really dig, I'm sure they can find it.
Yeah, and so after Skeleton Crew Diaries, you did Keep the Change, and we still recorded a couple songs for the Frog Hill Legend album
Yeah,
when I
yeah,
was
yeah,
living in Missouri. I know we did the Letter to Sakura where you played the guitar, and I think I had my friend play some keys. It was one of my classmates.
yeah. I remember that. And then
His
the
wife
track that
also
we
sang
did,
on the song.
yeah, and we did the proverb track, the Cloud Kingdom.
Yep, yep. Oh man, which was probably supposed to be on, on the album, right? The first album. It
Oh yeah,
didn't make
yeah,
it till the second cut. But yep, he was supposed to be on the Skeleton Crew Diaries, and then we got him on for the Frog Hill EP that I did in Missouri, and he was another great MC too. Rest in peace to Proverb. And I even
yeah,
had an idea in my mind that we should probably do a tribute. A
yeah.
tribute session to him because he's got a lot of great music and he was very active in the community, well liked, well loved, and he put it down and did a lot of great stuff, networking and mentoring of young MCs. So man, shout out to Proverb for his contributions to hip hop.
He was the ultimate networker, and
Yeah,
man, you like his wife Vanessa too. Like she was shocked too after he died, just like how far his reach was. Because I
yeah,
remember her writing about it at the time, and I was too, and I knew the guy really well. We were friends, not just over the internet, but
yeah,
we had known each other for a long time in Virginia, and man, like that guy's network was just crazy. I mean, he was responsible for putting so many people's music on, linking
yeah.
people together, and he was always positive, man. Even so, when I first started making beats, I would send him stuff that was just terrible because I had just started, and he would, instead of being like, "I'm not going to respond to this guy" or whatever, he would, even though we were friends outside of music, um, not just me like personally, but anybody.
Yeah.
He would always provide constructive criticism, and be like, oh, this sounds good, but this is where I think you could improve, and here's some stuff to listen to as ideas of where you could take this. And he was always trying to connect people, give them advice,
Yep.
and was positive 100% of the time. I mean, this guy, he would never be, even if somebody sent him an album to review and it was terrible, he would never be like, man, this album's terrible. He'd just be
Yep.
like, yeah, man, you show a lot of
Dude,
potential. You could do, this is what I think you could turn, because he saw potential in people and he knew everybody had to start at some point.
spot on, man. That's what I loved about Proverb, man. He was not a hater, man. He appreciated music as it was. And he was blogging before a lot of these other major blog sites were out and they knew of him. And like you said, he was putting folks out, man. And he was definitely well respected, and everybody was trying to get on, and they were hoping that Proverb would share their music. But you're right, man. Every time I interacted with him, he would not have anything bad to say about anybody. He just, like you said, he was very, mentoring, and like you said, he always found a positive way to flip things. But that's what I enjoyed about Proverb, man. He was just kind, man.
He was, man, but it's kind of funny because that dude would listen to everything, like everything, and I mean everything in hip hop. He knew. Like when I talked to him after Brian Moon put me on your stuff, I was like, man, have you heard the General Like Memphis Reigns album that came out recently? He's like, yeah, of course. So he already knew it. Like nobody I knew, like on the East Coast, knew what that was because it had just come out, and yeah, he already knew what it was. But it was funny because he's a super positive, upbeat guy. I never heard him curse ever, like not only on his music but in person or anything. But he'd also be bumping like Necro and Ill Bill stuff too.
He loved everything, man.
Just like on the complete opposite end of the spectrum that you wouldn't think that he'd be listening to. And he listened to all that stuff. So basically everything hip hop, no matter what it was, he got his hands on, listened to, and appreciated regardless of what it was. So we definitely need to do a session, man. I mean, it was amazing his reach. People were giving him shout outs, including, Little Brother.
Right?
Yeah. And it was just incredible. Like I had no idea that he connected with that many people and all over the world too, not just here.
He was very good with the international crowd too as well. And I took a lot of lessons from him too, as well, in terms of, working with different people. So yeah, we'll do a session about him, and we'll do a deep dive on Proverb. It's well deserved, and we got to remember good brothers like that, man, who did good for the music. Well, good deal, man. It was great to have him on Frog Hill, and you guys. After this album, you recorded a lot of other great tracks, like the Christmas joint that you and Spoon recorded. Was another dope track. That is also one of my personal favorites that frequents the playlist all the time. Yeah. And you guys even did a video on it, right? Is it still up on YouTube?
It is. Yeah. If you just put in Spoonful Xmas, it'll show up. Yeah. We did that one. That was probably the last track that we did. That was, December of 2009. Yeah. So 2 months after we had put out the Keep the Change album.
So, had the behind the scenes and I think there was a new camera involved, right? And you guys.
Yeah. His so the story behind that one is he had gotten his girlfriend a new camera for Christmas, and so she was just kind of messing with it, and then I was just down there hanging out, and we ended up actually getting snowed in. Blizzard came in, so I got stuck at his place, and we weren't planning on writing any music, right? Because we had just done this album, and we were like totally done with working on any tracks. But we were stuck inside, and his girlfriend had the camera, and so we're like, oh, let's write a song. So she recorded it and documented the whole thing from start to finish. So it wasn't like we had any ideas in our mind or anything. We're like, okay, we're gonna go record this now. It was just all from scratch and totally spontaneous, and it ended up being one of my favorite songs. So
yeah, that was that looked like a real fun song to make, and I'm glad you guys documented it at the time. And I'm a big believer like you now about doing these things so we can remember and preserve all the stories behind it. And we did it for Kassan too as well. I know you documented the process of making that album too, and we'll circle back at some point and do a session on that. And
Yeah,
I
because I
think
got a lot of questions for you on that one because
I know.
all my stuff is out there because I recorded the documentary showing like the writing and recording process of the whole thing. But now I got to get your take from the MC's perspective of getting the tracks, running through ideas, and how you recorded it, and where you were in Korea at the time, and
Yeah.
so that'll be another session.
The idea behind the song. I'm just very poor at recording myself and just documenting stuff. I always like prioritize recording the music, but every time I watch the videos of you doing it, I'm like, oh man, I wish I documented, what I was thinking at the time. But yeah,
That's how I feel, man. Like if I go back and I watch the Spoon stuff where we were recording 14, 15 years ago, I'm like, man, I can't believe it's been that long. But it's nice because you just forget things after all that time passes. It's just everything just kind of blurs together and you just don't really remember it vividly. And so it's kind of nice to have it documented because you can go back and you can be like, oh, wow. Like we don't even remember how we first met. And I had forgotten that I had been working with some tracks with Spoon until we started talking on this on this call. So yeah, it's always good to document stuff. And anybody out there, it's good to keep a journal too, just whenever you're working on stuff. So you don't think time will pass, but it does.
No, you're absolutely right, man. Even the Letter to Sakura track was the song concept behind that was me writing a letter to my kid, which I didn't have a kid at the time, right?
Yeah.
And that was 2009. And 5 years later, I'd have a daughter, right? Yeah. So kind of, it's kind of cool. But and then I told her it's cool just sit back with her and listen to the song and just kind of reflect. And she loved listening to the song after I explained to her what I was thinking in my head when I created it. So
awesome.
That's fun, man. But you're right. We'll go back and do this again. And so it's kind of the big reason why we started doing this podcast, right? Was to try to document everybody's story. Everybody has an interesting story to share, and it's fun just to walk through memory lane and pass these stories on to the future generations, right?
Yeah, and how everybody got to where they were. It's not just the music and how the albums were recorded, but like how were they introduced to music? How did they start recording, right? And like what's their process? And you realize that everybody's completely different, which is what makes the music unique. So
and you help kind of uncover some of the mystery, right? So you got Keep the Change, Spoonful, obviously isn't doing music that we know of in the last number of years, but he's got to include yourself, you guys have a large fan base, and you guys obviously pick up fans through the years, even after you're done making music. So interviews like this kind of help uncover the mystery on who D-Mitch is and who Spoonful is. So well, good, man. Well, hey, man, that was Skeleton Crew Diaries right there for you and everybody who's listening. And you can still find the album hanging online, and I'm sure Keep the Changes on there and all the other instrumental albums that you did. You can find them online. Do you actually still have a active Bandcamp that people can go to, or is it just hanging on YouTube?
No, I never had any. But if anybody ever wants to reach me, they can just hit me up through my website, which is just my name and my middle initial. So it's just David F is in Frank Mitchell.com. So it's davidfmitchell.com. And then there's a contact form, and I've got all the albums and stuff. I'm going to that's got all my publications and running stuff up there, and I need to create a page with a section for the music download, so I can just Keep the Change and Skeleton Crew Diaries and Kassan and like the MP3 high res versions, and so it's all in one place, so people can actually download it rather than I got the file somewhere on some external drive, and or people stream, so you just forget about it. So I really need to put it. So maybe I'll do that after this call. I'll create a page and then you can download everything from there.
Yeah, very dope, man. It's got to be heard. So again, check out my man D-Mitch's music, and then some of the projects that we did, Kassan and Skeleton Crew Diaries, and you'll see, man, it was a good time in music, and we had fun putting the projects out. So Dave, you got to
What's all
put that
about?
together. Yeah, for sure, man. Well, good. Well, hey, man, thanks for making some time today to document this portion on Skeleton Crew Diaries, and then we'll talk about some future stuff in the next couple weeks, man. So thanks. I appreciate
Right
it.
on. All right, man.
All right.
Thanks.
All right. Later.